So should we start by, tell us how you came to know Paul? What kind of, the whole the story in a way, like what was going on in your life, how you came together, what.
All right. Do you want my name or anything?
No, don't worry about any of that. That's all fine. We'll title you on screen and all that. But...
Well, I suppose I met Paul at Red Gallery, actually. And at the time I just started work at the college, and was and I was living actually, because it was all very quick how I got the job, because I don't know, that's another story.
Well,
I was in Leeds and I was actually unemployed. No, I got a job actually. I was working for the Royal Mail. I was working as a postie because I just decided I needed a job. And a year before, I'd applied to do an MA here basically because they were cheap, actually, at the college. And I think Jenny Womack was running them, or something, and Ginny Lindenbaum. Because Jenny was the head of theory at the time. But, and really, it was about where to live, really. So I was living in someone's house, because I had to work full-time when I got the job. And I got the job because someone phoned me up and said they were getting rid of all their staff, basically, just like they've just done now. And they needed someone. And because I started the MA, I did photography. I did wet photography as well. So they wanted someone to cover, really, and look after the machines and this and this. So that's how I got I worked as sort of filling in timesheets, first of all. It wasn't permanent, it was just daily, I just temporary. And then eventually I did get an interview and I got the job permanently. So that was April 2002, and then so I had to find somewhere to live in Hull. I didn't really know anyone in Hull, except for someone I know in Leeds. Her husband used to work for the university, so he had a house on Skullcoats. So I ended up asking him if I could stay there, basically, which wasn't ideal, but it did work for about 3 months, and then he got fed up, I think. So he didn't like sharing with anybody, and he was older, he was about 20 years older than me. So, so I was a bit too much for him, really. So, I don't know if was that the only place I stayed in Hull? I think, Skullcoats. So it was quite nice, actually. Got to know the drain around there, and of course the tannery was still there as well. You could smell it down the road, and the cemetery.
And the sweet factory.
The sweet factory, yeah. You can smell this bubblegum smell, can't you, coming across the river.
And what was... So, we'll move on to the Paul stuff, but, what was Hull like at that time? How did it strike you? What did you feel about the city?
Well, I think when I applied to do the MA, I thought, I like the docks, you see. I like although it's an estuary, it's a port, I like that whole thing. And I went down to the docks and took loads of photographs using XP2 film, which is a sepia. When you get it processed, you don't have to process it yourself. You can send it in as a colour film, basically, but you get it, you get it printed in sepia if you send it to the right people. So I used to use. And
what appealed to you about the docks? What was the vibe that you liked?
Well, it's also because I grew up in Great Yarmouth, which is also a port, but also it's also a seaside as well. It's built on a spit, and you can walk right up to the docks there, you see. So it's a bit different, but I was just because I like water, you see. So I was drawn to water because I'm a water sign, and I did sort of fall in love a bit with the maritime sort of thing in Hull. So, and actually when I met Paul, it was like he was all about boats, he was really into boats. He thought everything could be solved by everybody having boats, basically, which is in a sense is a bit it's quite, because I was thinking about the production they put on last year, Flood. And so this whole thing about water, about blokes, about, refugees now and all this. And also when I met Paul, he'd worked with all sorts of people as well. He'd worked with, African people, Asian people. He'd met people from all over the world, all over Europe. And for me, I think that also, when I met him at the Red Gallery, and he was looking for someone to come and come and stay at his place. And I didn't really know him that well, but I met him at Red Gallery, and I said I was looking for somewhere to live, and he said, they said, oh, maybe you should talk to Paul, because he's looking for somewhere. So, because I got to know, because I basically, when I came here, I just networked and got to know the art scene, got to know what was going on, the Red Gallery, got to know Espen, and also people like Corona Smith, Lee, was a student. So there's lots of people who were students when I started work at the college. There was Quinny, who also was a regular member of the, regular at the Boathouse. He used to help out. And Paul used to get the best out of people in a sense, because he got all these people to do things. So, so you needed people to do a lot of technical stuff, technical theatre stuff, although it wasn't called that, but in terms of putting on a gig at the Boathouse, and they always had lights, so there was always sort of stringing up, because it was set in the middle of a park. So what have you got? He only had electricity, actually, didn't have gas. So it was all about, well, where do you fix the electricity from, and where does it run? And they ran it across, and he had a computer. So they used to use this other guy called Rob Carey. He used to live in Beverley. I think he lives in Hull now. But he used to do all the computer stuff. He was a bit of a technical whiz on that. So, yeah, so gradually I got to know all these people through them being students, and then just going to events, going to Red, which was set up by students, ex-students of the college as well. Paul, what's his name? Paul Hughes, I think he was one of the founders of that. And, yeah, so I think that's where I met Paul. And I met Paul at these events, some of these events, some of which were organised by, because at the time now the art college is gone, sort of thing, as it was with all the old tutors in it, and some new ones, because everybody left the college last year. And they've set up something called the Feral Art School, which is a sort of, it's more like a virtual thing, but it does it runs courses and stuff like that, and they use venues, so they're not based anywhere, but they use venues. I'm not sure if they might have one base, and when I came to the college in 2002, there was another art school which was being run by, there was a different set of tutors, Rob Gawthrop and Pippa Kosnovac, I think that's. She works for Artist Newsletter in London now, but then she was a student. She was a student as well, actually, and then there was so they were setting up an alternative art college basically. So that was like anybody could be a lecturer. So they'd set up their own course and their own. So it's a similar idea really to what's going on now, which is the Feral, which is more like a cooperative and. Sort of independent from the system, so to speak.
And so the art college then had that kind of feel, though, did it? Yeah,
because it had they'd sort of got a manifesto, because they were in a dispute with Lincoln. Well, what would become Lincoln? Because when I first went there, I found all this headed notepaper, which was Humberside College, was it Humberside? Because basically that place has gone through a whole load of name. It was Humberside University. It was then it was
Technic, wasn't it, and all that.
Yeah, and it was just called Higher Education at one point, and then when I was there, it changed from the College of was it Lincolnshire?